This podcast is part of the Dark Myths Collective. Visit darkmyths.org to discover more shows like this one. The darkness awaits.
It's about to be a fun ride. Follow along, watch as we slide. Paranormal just hit the lights. Goosebumps all through the night. Mixing just a little bit of twain. That girl sure can't do a thing. Together hillbillies go insane. Laugh so hard it'll hurt your brain. Podcast you won't ever change. These two here, they got the recipe. Sit on back and listen in to some of our darkest mysteries, eh?
Welcome to Hillbilly Horror Stories. And now here's your hosts, Jerry and Tracy Polly, and their dog Ninja.
Greetings, guys and ghouls, and welcome to Hillbilly Horror Stories. Before we start tonight's show, please have a listen to this promo of a podcast that we think is to die for.
New to the Dark Myths Collective, Southern Grimoire with K.D. Burr. Listen to your favorite village witch explore unsolved crimes.
Few have heard of the Butcher of Oklahoma City, who earned his name for the gruesome way he disposed of his victims.
Mysteries.
Rumors and questions about the monstrous brothers persisted. It was agreed that the Carters' bodies should be exhumed and investigated, but their caskets were empty.
Legends.
The man was terrified to see the creature crawl out of the field and begin to sprint, running alongside his car at incredible speeds. He'd only heard of skinwalkers in his grandmother's stories.
And haunted history.
Castle Frankenstein was a real place in Germany, and in 1673, Johann Dippel was born there.
Southern Grimoire with K.D. Burr. Listen at southerngrimoire.buzzsprout.com or on your favorite podcast platform.
What are you doing here? Don't you know Jerry and Tracy live here? They're coming. They hear you. Ah, they're here.
Welcome to episode 85 of Hillbilly Horror Stories. My name is Jerry and I'm joined by my wife Tracy.
Hi, guys.
Now that we have dogs barking all over the neighborhood, we've got a cool show for you tonight. I'm excited about this one, as I am every show.
You're always excited.
You know, some of these shows, the topics don't really get my blood pumping until I start getting into the research. And then the more research I do, the more excited I get about it. So that's just the way it is.
Well, I'm glad for your blood pumping fiasco.
And this story tonight, you guys weighed in on, at least the ones in the group. So if you're not part of our group, Hillbilly Horror Stories on Facebook, you need to join up.
Come on.
Yep, we have a lot of fun in there. And what I did earlier in the week was I put a poll up and I listed, I don't know, it was like 8 or 9 topics.
And he says pole, he means a stripper pole right up in the bedroom.
That was not, because that would get unused. So
Ninja was working it pretty good the other day.
well, we are close to Louisville, so there could have been some Louisville Cardinals in there. You never know. That's why we don't put stripper poles up. We don't need them in our bedroom.
Oh.
So we put this poll up. We put 7, 8, 9 different topics on there and told the listeners that you pick the stories we'll do the next 2 weeks. So with the first and second place will be this week's show, next week's show. And it was actually a tie. So I went ahead and went with the Tower of London. That's the story we're doing tonight. Next week, we're going to do a Robert the Doll reboot, or revisit, I guess as Phil Holmes said. Speaking of which, Phil Holmes, the host of Scared, will actually be on a little later in this show, talking a little bit about Tower of London and his show Scared.
Awesome.
So yeah, this one's going to be pretty cool. Before we get deep into the story, though, I wanted to talk about some upcoming guests we have. I just finished a couple of nights ago an awesome interview with John E.L. Tenney. Most of you will probably know who he is. If you don't, you need to know who he is. This guy is a all things weird guy. I mean, I say that in the nicest way, as you'll hear in the interview.
Very interesting.
Yeah, this guy, he knows paranormal stuff. He knows cryptid stuff. He knows UFO stuff. I mean, this guy is a jack of all trades when it comes to weird, and he's traveled the last 28 years doing lectures on the weird. So I mean that as an utmost compliment when I say weird, because that's what he would prefer to be called. With that being said, that interview will be on next week because we already have a pretty full show. But upcoming guests, we have Keith Linder. You may not have heard of this guy, but he has an awesome story, documentary getting ready to come out, a book coming out on the Bothell Hell House, which is, man, an unbelievable story that's up around the Seattle, Washington area. I know it's up in Washington. I think it's close to Seattle, though. And this guy has had all kinds of demonic presences in his house. It's garnered national attention. He's been on tons of different other paranormal shows. He's been on a bunch of news channels. So it's going to be fun to get his story. And then Adam Berry, which most of you guys will know as the co-host of Kindred Spirits, along with Amy Bruni. We're going to have him coming up. So the next 3 weeks is going to be awesome for you guys guest-wise. So I'm excited about that. And then we started off tonight with Phil Holmes from Scared. Tracy, go ahead and let's jump in with the...
I got some in my eyeball, though.
Not important.
Oh, my lordy.
The listeners come first.
Okay.
On with the show. So before Tracy reads this week's iTunes reviews and Patreon supporters, big shout out, thank you to all of our military, civil servants all over the world, no matter which country you work for or support. Thank you for everything you do.
Yes, we appreciate you guys so much. I just don't know if you realize how much you are appreciated, but we love you, and we pray for you guys all the time.
All right, so Tracy, iTunes reviews this week. We had a bunch of them beginning of the week.
Okay, our first one was from Mealers, and the next one is pretty long numbers, but I'm going to block it out. So it's 6473, 8297, 4646, 3782, 82. Woohoo!
I'm assuming that's somebody's credit card number.
Oh,
and that's
Lord.
Probably an expiration date.
Oh, my gosh. I hope that's not true. Don, Magic 167. Mm-hmm. Mike, not Ike. I love it. Fun Guy, 2009. Elizabeth, 92504. Deb, 1569. S. Burgess, 131. 096 Pixie. We can't thank you guys enough. Love the reviews. You guys are so awesome. And it just makes my day every day. So keep on bringing those reviews on, and we're going to do our best to keep bringing you the great stories you guys deserve.
We also had a couple of new Patreon supporters this week. Thank you so much. We did.
Chelsea Smith, Leslie Tyler, and Carol Ann Dowd. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you guys' support. Just through iTunes reviews, Patreon. We love you guys so much.
Yep, we just released a Patreon episode earlier in the week, and it was Haunted Cincinnati. So we had a bunch of stories from Cincinnati on there.
We did. Those daggone stories were good.
I mean, you had the Cincinnati Zoo. Look, I'll be a little bit of a spoiler alert. There was a cemetery that back in the 1800s, they had a room that if you went through the cemetery too fast in your car, they would arrest you and keep you overnight.
No way.
You heard that story.
You know, I did hear it, but I don't know. I just still find it hard to believe. So don't speed. My gosh.
We're going to give you all kinds of stuff that's hard to believe tonight, because we're going to talk about the infamous Tower of London. And what I like about these stories is everybody's into Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Except for me, because I've never seen it.
And because of me, because I've never seen it either. But my daughter loves it. Wears their underwear, their t-shirts.
So if
it's ridiculous.
Glad you just threw her dirty underwear
sorry
all over
that.
the place. But the fact that so many people are into it, I think the story may actually mean a little more to you, because most of the stories have to do with similar to what you see on there. This is real life Game of Thrones right here, and I got to imagine that's where most of these stories were inspired by the things that happened in England during the early days. So let's go on like we normally do. Let's do some history. The Tower of London was built by William the Conqueror in 1078. That's a long time ago.
It was a little bit before my time even.
It's a complex of multiple buildings set within 2 rings of walls built to keep intruders out. So you can imagine back in the day. So That's kind of hard to picture, but if you can pull pictures up, so you don't really have to picture it.
That's true. That's
And we'll be
bizarre.
posting some pictures tonight, obviously.
Okay, good.
Several expansions were made over the year by different kings during the 12th and the 15th century. So over the years, there have been several different modifications, I guess, and additions made to the tower, but it's still pretty much the original layout from what it was in the beginning.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, the Towers of London has played a major role in the history of England. You know, it's funny, though. You know, we talk about over here, I guess it's all about perspective. And I talk a little bit about this with Phil Holmes later, because obviously he lives in England. And when I ask him the question about, hey, you know, everybody over here says the most haunted place in the world, Tower of London. Just without a doubt, almost everybody says that. Mm-hmm. And I asked him about it, and he says it doesn't even really come up on the list of like top 5, 10 over there.
Kidding.
But, you know, I guess it's just like anything else. They may say Waverly, where we're right by Waverly, and may say Tower of... So it's perspective, I think. I think if it's close to you, you know...
It's like no big deal, I guess.
Yeah, but I think you'll find that part of the conversation fascinating about when we get into perspective from what England sees as most haunted as opposed to what we see. Pretty cool. Now, like I said, you know, the Tower of London has played a major role in England. So it's been a treasury, it's been a public records office, an armory, and the Royal Mint, and it is currently the home of the crown jewels.
Ooh, nice.
Yep. You can't mention England's history without mentioning the Tower of London. It's just that simple. It's been besieged several times. Kings and conquerors believed that in order to control the country, you had to control the tower. It was that simple. And during the 15th century, the tower was used as a prison. Mm-hmm. The peak period of it actually being a prison was in the 16th and 17th century, though. So it was a little bit later when it really became well known as a prison. The use of the tower as a prison made the term sent to the tower popular. Lots of prominent people were held captive there, including Elizabeth I. So most people talk about the tower being a place of death and torture, which you could imagine. What most people will be surprised to find out is there were actually only 7 people executed within the walls of the tower.
Well, that's not very many. I mean, it's too many, but...
Now, up on the hill, on the other hand, there was 112 executions in a 400-year period.
Oh.
Most of these executions were beheadings.
Oh, my gosh.
93, to be exact.
Oh, wow.
And there was 11 by firing squad. And that actually happened during, like, the World Wars.
Yeah.
Because there were some people that was sent there from espionage. We'll get in that just a little bit later. John Taylor and Anthony Salvino restored the towers back to, I guess, its medieval appearance the best that they could. They cleared out all of the most medieval structures.
Yeah.
They kind of took it back to the day when they took it over. Now, during World War I and II, they were using it as a prison again. And once again, 11 men were executed there for espionage. So that's where it gets into...
Well, they don't play, do they?
Oh, no. So the tower was badly damaged during the Blitz of World War II when they were dropping all the bombs and stuff over there. They repaired it and opened it up to the public, and today the tower is cared for by the historic Royal Palace.
I wonder if they used cannonballs.
I don't think they did in World War II.
Oh, no, I mean back in the other day.
What other day?
The other day when they were fighting. No? Oh. No cannonballs even in World War II?
There's no possible way I can have 2 wives with cannonball stories.
Oh. We don't want to talk about the other one.
Okay, so I'm going to tell the story.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I don't know if she'll listen or not. So my ex-wife, years and years ago, and keep in mind, she was young, so we'll use that as an excuse. So we were having a talk. We lived really close to Fort Knox, and Fort Knox would have, I guess, like, not reenactments, but, you know, practices, I guess, like a better term, maneuvers, whatever they would call it, where they actually shoot off the guns. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the kind of big weapons
like
that we use nowadays.
House. Yeah.
And, yeah, that's exactly what would happen. We weren't that far from it, so when they would do that, you could hear the boom, the windows and stuff would rattle. And my ex-wife at one point said, "What do they do with all those cannonballs?"
Oh.
And I just smiled and looked at her and I said, "What cannonballs?" And she was thinking that they still use cannonballs today.
I was a little farther back. Come on now. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, that story is kind of funny. But today the towers are actually protected by the World Heritage Site. It should come to no surprise that the several ghosts reportedly haunt towers, searching for either justice or, I guess, their heads.
Oh, that's awful. We shouldn't laugh at that.
Well, I mean, they've been dead for a long time, so
Yeah.
there's nothing we can do about it. We're going to cover some of the most commonly seen ghosts. And what I'm going to do, I've got a bunch of stories to share with you guys. Some of them are shorter, but some of the better ones I saved for the end to get a little more detail. This is just a pretty big topic, and I wanted to get to as many different stories as I could to try to cover as much as I can. Because like I said, the Tower of London is not an easy subject to get into, because I could have probably picked 50 other stories to tell.
Wow. Good. I can't wait to hear.
So I wanted to start with probably the most strange of the spirits that haunt, and it's in the Royal Menagerie. It's the spirit of a bear. And this bear actually lived there at one point in time.
Like he had his own room?
Well, I don't think he had his own room. I guess the question would be, what the hell was a bear doing there? First of all, don't curse at me. Okay, I cursed at myself.
I was going to say, when did I curse?
In 2010, King John assembled a bunch of animals at the tower, and he used them for fighting expositions.
Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, for spectators.
Nope.
So this was an awful practice, as you can imagine, and it was pretty popular, though, with the people. I'm thinking Michael Vick may have been involved. Maybe not in 2010.
I don't think so, hon.
But over the years, it became somewhat of a makeshift zoo where visitors could see strange beasts from all over the world, including a polar bear. Now, that's not what they're seeing as a polar bear. They're seeing a regular bear. But
Wow.
in 1832, the Duke of Wellington moved all the animals to the London Zoo. So I guess that's a little better. Some believe that the troubled spirits of these animals, including lions and monkeys, haunt the tower. And obviously, we've got the bear. So one guard said that the ghost of this bear kind of charged at him, and then it disappeared as soon as he stabbed it with his bayonet.
Oh, wow. How do you stab a ghost?
Apparently you don't. That's why it disappeared.
Oh.
So continuing with the odd stories. The oldest tower is the White Tower. This is where Henry VIII's armor is stored at. Okay? Now, people claim that when they walk into this room that they feel this horrifying, crushing sensation that stays with them the whole time that they're in there. Now, the minute they leave, the feeling kind of goes away. Guards have been attacked by unseen forces in there, and one was actually covered and strangled by a real big heavy cloak.
Yeah.
And he said that when he finally got free, he looked around, he got the thing off and looked around, and there was nobody in the room with him. So, but something was covering him with this and like forcing it down on him.
Mm-hmm. So, like the other people before, was it mostly that they couldn't breathe because they felt the pressure, or like is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, a little bit of that, and just the fact of like a heaviness of like something's wrong, like kind of like you feel it right after you get some really bad news or something like that.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Another guard stopped to rest his feet. He took his shoes off, and right afterwards, he heard a whisper behind him say, "It's only you and I here."
Oh.
I'm guessing pretty soon it was just the other person because he probably got the hell out of there.
Oh, I'm sure.
But nobody's really sure if the spirit's Henry VIII or some other malevolent spirit.
Man.
But it's obviously not a good spirit.
That is creepy.
So let's get into some of the more popular stories, just of people. And what I'll do is I'll kind of break it down a little bit about the history of that person and what happened to them, and then what we've seen ghost-wise.
Okay.
And this is going to be a big history lesson. For it's more history than paranormal, but I think it's going to be very enjoyable. So Lady Arbella Stewart. Lady Stewart was the second cousin of Queen Elizabeth I, which we've already said she spent some time in the tower as a prisoner. She secretly married William Seymour, who was the nephew of Lady Jane Grey. Now, we're going to get into a great story of Lady Jane Grey a little bit later, but it's irrelevant at this moment. This pissed off King James I that she had this secret marriage. Because after they got married, he saw them as a threat to the throne, which we're going to see a lot of in most of these stories. So he sent both of them to the tower. Her husband, William Seymour, and Lady Arbella. They tried to escape. Unfortunately, it was not really successful because what she tried to do was get on a ship and stow away, but somebody recognized her on the ship, so they sent her back. she was supposed to rendezvous and meet up with William Seymour, but he missed it.
He missed the boat?
He missed the boat. She got sent back, and then he still got away. So he ended up going to like France or something like that, and they never saw each other again.
Oh my gosh. What's somebody have to be a snitch for?
I don't
Can't
know.
just let true love happen.
So heartbroken, she refused to eat, and she died in the tower in 1615.
Aw.
She said to haunt the Queen's house. Well, we'll get into the Queen's house a whole bunch in here. The governor of the tower lived right there in these rooms from 1994 to 2006. He reported one time that his wife was pushed so violently by an unseen force that it knocked her completely out of the room and into the hallway.
Oh, wow.
Other people have seen her walking around the grounds of the tower just kind of weeping.
So I wonder, though, if she didn't eat and all that because she was sad she got caught, or that she was pissed off he didn't try to come back and fetch her.
Well, I don't think anybody's going to be coming back, and I don't think they definitely fetched anybody back in the day.
You don't know.
That was more of a... I don't think they were... Ye old, fetch ye old. I guess maybe they did.
They might have, and that's really a very sad story.
It is a sad story,
That
and
makes
that's
me mad.
just the beginning of several sad stories.
Aw.
There's no good stories in here, just so you know.
Okay, all right.
Margaret de la Pole. She was a stripper. I'm just kidding. In 1541, the tower saw one of its most gruesome botched executions in the history of the tower.
Oh my gosh, what happened?
Margaret de la Pole was the Countess of Salisbury. Love their steaks. Don't you like Salisbury steaks?
No, Jerry, get on with the program.
She was arrested and sent to the tower as an enemy of the state. Now, because her son... Now, get this. She didn't do anything wrong. It's because of her son. He was a cardinal, and he denounced Henry VIII as head of the Church of England. Well, unfortunately for Margaret, her son was in France, so Henry took his anger out on her.
Oh, man.
Dear old mom. When they brought her to the scaffold to behead her, she refused to kneel.
Wait. Yeah, you have to kneel. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. She basically said that traitors kneel, and I'm not a traitor. She said it in a more elegant way, but that's what it meant. And yet you're right. Let's cover that a little bit. Picture, everybody has thought of like when they do the hangings, they got the big scaffold. Same situation. It's basically a stage. They have a block, a wooden block that sits on the scaffold, and you get down on your knees and you lay your throat on that block. Mm-hmm. That's how it works. So yeah, I couldn't imagine, here, go ahead and get down on your knees, and just people voluntarily doing that when they're getting ready to have their head cut off.
Yeah.
But that is exactly how they went down. So, well, she came from a noble background. So she's, a lot of kings, queens, dukes, stuff like that in her family. So she was a pretty prominent person. So about 150 people were there to see her execution. When the executioner raised his axe, she took off running. So he chased her around, hacking at her until she was dead.
I'm sorry, that's not funny.
That's not funny at all.
It isn't funny. I can just picture that is not funny.
Like some Benny Hill music playing around.
But listen, why couldn't her famous family protect her?
The kings and queens were being killed on a regular basis. There was no protecting from anybody.
Oh, well.
Once again, the whole Game of Thrones type thing.
Oh, well, I don't watch that, so I don't know what the heck.
I don't watch it either, but I know what it means.
Okay.
The screams of Margaret are frequently heard at the site of her, where the scaffold is, where her visitors claim that they've seen a reenactment.
Oh my
of this.
gosh!
Like this just plays out over and over where people can see it. Even
Why
though
didn't she run faster?
Well, she's up on a she's up on a little.
Oh, I thought she jumped off of it.
No. Then we got maybe the most famous ghost of all of it, Queen Anne Boleyn. Now, she was the second wife of Henry VIII. This is a very sad story, too. She was accused of adultery and incest with her brother George.
Well, that's gross.
She was beheaded at the Tower in 1536. Before her execution, though, and this is right before, she told the crowd not to blame her husband. Now, you would think that would mean, well, I mean, she's guilty, so not the case. She said that Henry made up these charges so that he could remarry, so he could get a male heir to the throne, because apparently she couldn't have kids.
Well, that's not her fault.
Her fault or not, she had her head cut off.
Well, I guess they'd never heard of friends with benefits back in the day. Look, if he had come to me and said, hey, you can't give me no kids, so you're either going to let me have sex with another or I'm going to cut your head off. What do you think I'm going to say? Sex it up. Do it. Don't cut my head off. That's what I would say.
I don't know that you would say that or not.
I would. I don't want my head cut off, rolling around like a bowling ball.
At least I know what my options are.
Well, there you go. But everybody heard it, so there you go. Don't behead me.
I just can't imagine a situation to where this is somebody that you're married to, and just because she can't, okay, I get it. Have you ever heard of a divorce?
Hello, that's what I'm saying.
Anne's usually seen near the site of her execution, and in the Queen's house. Because we talked about the Queen's house the last time. It's called the Queen's house because Henry VIII had it built for Anne, Queen Anne. Sometimes she's seen at the altar of the chapel where her body is. I guess she's buried in there. One guard tells the story of seeing a hooded figure in that area. He said, despite the guard's direct order to pretty much leave and get out of there, the figure just kept approaching him. And once it started coming quicker, he decided to charge at the figure, and he pulled out his bayonet, and about that time, he realized that the figure there, had no head, and he ran right through it.
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding?
No.
Because he didn't have no head and he couldn't see with no eyeballs.
But I don't think that's... I think maybe it's because it was just a spirit.
Man, that is some hardcore crap, man. I would not want to. What?
I was going to say, it's just...
It's the craziest stuff I've ever heard.
So now let's talk about Anne's cousin, Catherine Howard, because she actually suffered the same fate as Anne, having her head cut off. Her ghost is seen in Hampton Court, where she briefly escaped from the guards, who then, caught up with her and arrested her. But she ran down the hall to plead her for her life with Henry, and he was attending mass inside the chapel. Because being the good guy that he is, going to church on a regular basis.
Okay, yeah.
This didn't do her
Please
really...
forgive me, God. I'm about to behead another person. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Give me a break.
So this didn't really do any good because, they caught her and she was beheaded anyway.
Well, she wasn't beheaded in the church, I hope.
No, they didn't just catch up with her like they did, your girl. They wouldn't chasing her down.
Oh my gosh, this is making my stomach hurt.
Well, there's plenty more. So your stomach will be, you'll need some antacid or something before this is over with.
Ugh.
Then we got the ghost of Edmund Bonner. He was the Bishop of London, and supposedly he haunts Bethnal Green, which is another part up there. Edmund had a few fun nicknames. Bloody Bonner was one of his names. That's fun. He gained it from his persecution of Protestants under Mary I's reign. He used to own property there. That's why they have Bonner Road and Bonner Street, and it's all named after him. So, not too much on him, but
yeah,
he's one of the ones you see. Now, here's a name everybody will know, but I didn't know a whole lot about this gentleman until I did some research, so it's kind of cool. Sir Walter Raleigh's ghost has been spotted at the tower. He was imprisoned there for 13 years. I had no clue that.
No kidding.
Yeah, so everybody knows he was a big explorer and all that stuff.
Yeah, what the heck did he do?
Well, he's got kind of a unique story because he's also seen in Devon and Beddington in South London, where he owned some land there too. So legend has it that his wife arranged to have his body secretly buried at the church there at Beddington.
Mm-hmm.
But historical research actually states that he was buried at St. Margaret in Westminster after he was executed in 1618. I wanted to dig a little bit into who Sir Walter Raleigh was and how all this happened, because I've heard of him my entire life. I never had a clue that he was executed and all this stuff. So here's what happened. During Elizabeth's reign, Sir Walter Raleigh actually organized 3 major expeditions to America, including the first English settlement in America in 1587, which was Roanoke, the whole missing, the missing colony and all that stuff. So that didn't really work out real well for him, I don't guess. Raleigh later fell out of favor with Queen Elizabeth after she learned that he had a secret marriage to a young lady by the name of Bessie Throckmorton. What about it? How'd you like to have that name? You probably need to be executed just for that. This really kind of pissed, Elizabeth off because Bessie was one of her maids of honor at her wedding. So I guess she kind of felt like that, that was betrayal, which, once again, she's already married. Don't understand what the problem is. So she turned around and imprisoned Sir Walter Raleigh and Bessie in the Tower of London. He was able to buy his freedom. So I guess if you had enough money, you could buy your freedom. So Sir Walter Raleigh formally married Bessie and distanced himself from the jealous queen, because you can imagine what kind of problems you could run into. So after Elizabeth died in 1603, Sir Walter Raleigh was implicated as a foe of King James I and imprisoned with a death sentence. So they thought they had like a coup working against him to try to overthrow him. They put in and gave him the death penalty. But the death sentence was commuted a little bit later, and in 1616, Sir Walter Raleigh was freed to go lead an expedition into the New World again, this time to establish a gold mine in the Orinoco River region of South America. But this was a big disaster. It was a big failure. It didn't work. So when he got back to England, the death sentence of 1603 was invoked against him.
Why did he go back to England?
Well, I guess he had to.
But
he probably didn't think that was going to amount to anything.
So he thought he was just going to go back, hey, y'all, what's up?
Well, I mean, they let him out to go do this this expedition, so... But anyway, that's a little bit of history on Sir Walter Raleigh.
I did not
but he
know
haunts
that.
all kinds of different parts of England, apparently. So let's talk, everybody knows Henry VIII. Let's talk about King Henry VI. So if you haven't noticed already, most of the grisly deaths in the Tower were like a real-life Game of Thrones, like we've talked about. So King Henry was the only son of Henry V. He was in line to inherit the English and the French throne. I don't know how you inherit both of those.
How do you do that?
But that's what he was in line for. Henry VI seemed to always find himself into some kind of royal skirmish. I mean, I don't know what his problem was, but there was always something going on. And in 1471, during the Wars of the Roses, which I didn't even realize that movie was out then. I guess that was... It's a good movie, though.
It is a good movie.
Henry VI was imprisoned by the House of York at the Tower. Initial reports said that Henry died brokenhearted of an illness in the Tower May 21st, 1471. But the likely truth is, it's probably something a little more sinister, as we could imagine. The story goes that after Henry's imprisonment, Edward, Richard of York's son, took control of the throne, and after the Battle of Tewkesbury, he called for Henry's assassination. Henry was stabbed to death as he was kneeling in prayer in the Wakefield Tower. Every year on the anniversary of his death, his ghost is seen to appear pacing around the exact spot that he was killed, and he disappears at the last stroke of midnight.
Wow. Well, at least he was praying while he was getting stabbed to death.
I guess so.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Now, we're going to start to get into some of the stories that I found a little more fascinating. Lady Jane Grey, I told you earlier that we were going to talk about her. This is maybe the saddest story out of all. Well, no, it's not. The last one's the saddest one, but this is right there with it. This is a story that tells you to go with your gut and not let peer pressure force you into bad decisions. Yeah. So Lady Jane's relatives actually convinced her that since she was the great-granddaughter of Henry VII, that she should be the rightful queen. But Henry VIII's daughter, Mary I, which we talked about a little bit ago, she had different ideas. Mary I married Philip of Spain and was crowned queen. She immediately sentenced Lady Jane and her husband, Guilford Dudley, to be executed.
What? How old was she?
Well, we'll get into that. Numerous members of her family were beheaded at the Tower, including her husband. Now, after his execution, Guilford Dudley's body was carted past the room where Lady Jane was being held so she could see purposely his remains.
Wow.
The saddest part of the story to me is the fact that she came across as sweet and innocent.
Yeah.
You know, she was put in a bad spot. She wasn't looking to be queen.
Yeah.
Her relatives talked her into doing this, and it just did not. It pretty much signed her death warrant from the day that they asked her to do that. A prime example of her youth and honesty is when she was brought to the scaffold. They blindfolded her, and she had trouble locating that block that we talked about. And she's up there feeling around.
Oh, gosh.
And she's saying, "What shall I do? Where is it?"
Oh,
And to me, that just hits me as extremely sad.
that's very sad. Oh my gosh.
She died 1554 at the age of 16.
What? What are their obsessions with cutting off your dang head?
I don't know. Her husband's ghost has been seen at the Beauchamp Towers, and it's said that his ghost will sit there and weep throughout the night.
Oh.
People claim that he's responsible for the word Jane that was etched into the walls there, and it's still visible today.
No way.
Jane was sighted in 1957 walking along the tower's grounds.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible. That's just a horrible story.
Now we're going to get into the saddest story.
They're a bunch of buttholes.
The Bloody Tower, and it's called that for a reason. This is the story of the two princes. April 9th, 1483, King Edward IV died unexpectedly after being sick for about 3 weeks. At the time of his death, the king had 2 sons, 12-year-old Edward V, who would now be the king, and 9-year-old brother Richard of Shrewsbury, the Duke of York. The dead king, Edward IV, had a brother by the name of Richard III. He was the Duke of Gloucester. Now, before his death, Edward listed his brother, Richard III, as his kid's protector and guardian. So that's where the kids are going to go. So the new king, 12-year-old Edward, set out to meet his uncle, Richard III, with a group of advisors and family members on April 29th. The next day, Richard III had all of his advisors, including the family members, arrested, and on June 25th, they were beheaded. So Richard III then took Edward himself and had Edward's mother, Elizabeth Woodville, take her other son, Richard, the Duke of York, and her daughter to the sanctuary in Westminster Abbey. Edward and Richard, his uncle, arrived in London together. This was supposed to be for Edward's coronation as king, but the date was postponed from May 4th to the 25th of June, and he had very good reason for doing that. On May 19th, 1483, Edward was put up in the Tower of London, which is where all the other prior kings, queens, whatever the monarchs would be that were getting ready to be coronated, were held, so nothing was strange about that. On June 16th, he was joined by his little brother Richard. So now the two brothers, the two princes, were back together. Now, right after Richard postponed the coronation indefinitely.
Okay.
So now we went from having it in July to we don't know when we're going to have it. On June 22nd, at a sermon at St. Paul's Cross, it was preached that Richard III was the only real legitimate heir to the throne. So now he starts getting a backing of he should be king and not this little boy. June 25th, a group of the Lords, Knights, and Gentlemen petitioned Richard to take the throne. Both princes were declared illegitimate by Parliament and in a confirmation in 1984 by an act of the Parliament. Now, what that basically means was there was an act that stated that King Edward and Elizabeth Woodville's marriage was invalid because of Edward's pre-contract from a marriage he had with another lady, Eleanor Butler.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, they're saying that their marriage wasn't legal with Elizabeth.
Right.
Therefore, those kids couldn't be rightful heirs to the throne.
Well, that makes sense.
So Richard III was crowned king on July 3rd.
Okay.
Most will tell you that this was a bullshit story and to get the throne away from the boys because they were not illegitimate. This was just what was done to bend the rules to get whoever in there.
Well, I mean, aren't they awful young to be king anyway?
But that happened all the time. Matter of fact, at the same time, France, well, we'll get into that in a few seconds, but when France at the time had a leader that was like 13 years old.
Oh, gosh.
But this is the background on the story, but it's not the fascinating part of the story. So what happens next shows you the cruelty of power-hungry individuals, I think. So after Richard took the throne, the two princes were taken to the inner apartments of the tower, and they were seen less and less until they disappeared altogether. So during this time when hardly anybody was seeing the young boys, King Edward was being seen regularly by a doctor. Now he said that Edward felt like death was facing him Because he felt like this, he prepared for sacrifice. He sought remission for his sins and had daily confessions to try to prepare for what was getting ready to happen to him. There are reports of seeing the princes play out on the Tower grounds shortly after Richard was brought to be with his brother Edward. There are no recording sightings, though, after the summer of 1483. An attempt to rescue them in late July failed, and many historians believe that the two princes were murdered near the end of the summer 1483.
Oh, man.
In 1674, workmen that were over by a staircase near the White Tower dug up a wooden box containing two small human skeletons.
Oh, my gosh. Nobody even had a clue that whole time.
It's widely accepted that these are the remains of the two princes, but it was never proven. King Charles had the bones buried at Westminster Abbey, and there's an inscription on a monument there that the bones were put in that pretty much alludes that King Richard III had them killed so he could take over the crown.
Wow. I just don't get it.
So,
That's really sad.
it is really sad.
Why people have to go that route?
Because I think about them out there playing on the ground. I just think about a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old boy just playing around.
And they don't even know the responsibilities of all that. No, I have no clue.
And this is supposed to be their uncle.
Yeah. Well, it sounds to me like family didn't mean crap back in the days. They'll behead you, and as soon as you turn your head around, I don't care. That's the way I feel about it.
So can you see why the Tower of London may have a few ghosts running around?
Yeah, that's just terrible. You'd think that beheading crap would get old. They could think of something new.
Or use a guillotine, at least like the French did.
Well, why you got to cut their heads off? That don't make no sense. Then you got all these heads you got to do something with. I mean...
Well, they used to do that because they would. You remember we were watching one of the videos, and we didn't even get into this story, but they were talking about how they would take the heads out there and put them on these sticks, and just like there was a bridge that you had to cross over to get to the tower.
Remember that. Yeah.
And they would take all these people that they beheaded that would try to overthrow the king or something, and they would behead them and put their heads on those and put them out there, so you had to see them as you walked to the bridge.
That's not cool.
So that's the story basically that we've got. And before we get out of here, obviously, I want to play this video with Phil Holmes. Phil Holmes is, I've said before on here, he's a mentor to us. He's helped us a lot, and we talk about that during this. When we first got into podcasting, he was our first guest.
Yep, he sure was.
And, he had a huge show, and he didn't have to come on ours.
I know it.
And he did, and he's been a good friend ever since. And it's fun having him on this time to talk about the Tower of London and his show, because he's totally redone his show. Mm-hmm. And he's going to talk a little bit about that. But Phil is extremely funny.
Yes,
so
he is.
This is a fun interview. So let's take a listen to Phil Holmes real quick. All right, well, we got one of the few times that we've had a repeat guest on. I thought it would be fun, since we're doing an English episode with the Tower of London, to bring on my favorite Englishman, Mr. Phil Holmes, host of Scared. Phil, what's going on, brother?
Jerry, hey, nice to speak to you. And Jerry, I do find that I do repeat on people. Normally it gives them wind, but it's just nice to be back on the show. How you doing?
I'm doing good. We have had the opportunity to be on your show back on Halloween, and I thought it would be a great opportunity this week to return the favor.
Well, I think this is my third time now on Hillbilly Horror Stories. And, as I said, the first two occasions, the check didn't clear. But now you've done credit card via Stripe, we're okay. And it's nice to be back. And I love the way that you and Tracy are revisiting, like you've just done with Bobby Mackey's, revisiting these places, because you can never get enough of some of these locations. And, of course, with you being near to Bobby Mackey's, it's a brilliant idea. How's it going for you?
It's going really well. I like doing the revisits. I don't want to get overrun with them, because there's only about 11 that we could do anyway. But I do think a couple of those stories got glossed over and needed to be better done. And I think the first one that we did here on Bobby Mackey's, I think it ended up being a lot better, just with all the information and the interview we threw on, and having Bobby Mackey's little intro that we recorded up there. And obviously you and Gabriel are huge Bobby Mackey fans, so we had Bobby do that little recording for you guys.
I thought that was great. You got Bobby Mackey And we've shared the video in our Scared group. You got Bobby Mackey in the darkest place on the planet Earth. You've recorded some video, so it's like a perfect silhouette.
Well, he's an older guy. He's in his 70s now. It's amazing what he actually does when you think about the fact that he performs there every Friday and Saturday night. He doesn't even come on stage until 10 p.m. And, this guy's in his mid-70s, and he just gets up there and does 2 or 3 sets. And, I don't know that I would have the energy to do that. But I went back in his little private room, and there was about 6, 7 people in there. And this room was, this size of a large bathroom. It was not very big at all. And I sat down literally right in front of him to record, and it was kind of dark, and I didn't want to put the light on because it literally would have blinded him from as close as he was sitting. And then as soon as we got finished with that one, the one we did for you and Gabriel, I was going to have him do the other little piece. And right before we did that, somebody turned on a lamp in there, and all of a sudden the light was great. So I didn't want to ask him to do it again because I knew he had a bunch of people waiting to talk to him. So.
No, well, it was very kind what you did. And what I love about it is the fact that you guys are revisiting these locations. Jerry, c'est moi, I've had to reboot. I've had to do CPR on Scared. It's been a major bypass operation. You guys have just gone, let's go back and see Bobby Mackey. For me, down to the basics, pulling it apart, starting again. And I'm 45, Jerry. It's aged me, friend. It's aged me.
Well, but in a sense, though, you're revisiting, too, because you're kind of going back to your radio days.
It's true. And, and if anybody listens to my show, Scared, I've always had that problem, apart from really with you guys, of time differences because, you're on East Coast time in Kentucky. Now, that's normally, it's not at the moment because you've changed your clocks already. We haven't done ours yet. But normally, that's 5 hours before me. So, of course, and I explain this, and anybody listening that deals outside of the United States, if you live there, people come home from work and they see the kids and they take the dog out and they have a bowl of grits and they want to talk at 7 o'clock. Well, that's midnight for me. And if we're talking West Coast, if we're talking Bigfoot stories or something like that from Washington State, then that's 8 hours. So that's 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's why I was releasing shows sort of every month, because I could never tie in a guest. And being a single dad as well as I am, if a guest had to cancel, because of soccer practice or yoga lesson, or maybe they got abducted by aliens, when we then tried to set it up again, it would be like in 2 weeks' time. And I sat down and I thought, well, I can't rely on guests anymore. Because of the time difference, I've got to fill it up with some other rubbish. I mean, new features. So I went back to my radio days where I would play songs and talk absolute rubbish. And that's what we're doing with the new sound of Scared, which is really the old sound, but just no guests. Even though the new episode is a guest from Kentucky. Are you keeping up, Jerry? For goodness sake, write some notes down, man, will you?
I'm trying here.
Yeah, I'm very trying. Let me tell you, I'm very trying.
Well, but before we get into this a little deeper, let's go back and first say that you were, I believe, the very first interview that I had on Hillbilly Horror Stories, because you are a mentor to us. And I mean that in the truest sense of the word. I've probably learned more about the podcast business from talking with you than anybody. And that has been a friendship from the beginning that once we struck it up has been long lasting. And you're still always around whenever I need any kind of help. And we bounce ideas off each other and so on and so forth. And nothing has changed on that. You're still every bit of a mentor. And I respect what you're doing. Obviously, Scared was one of the first podcasts on the paranormal that I actually listened to. And you have completely reinvented it because it was strictly listener stories, and now you've taken it upon yourself to change it up to some features and still do some listener stories, but in a different way and pre-record it and stuff like that. And I think it takes a lot of balls to take something that has been as successful as Scared. We're not talking about a show that wasn't working. We're talking about a show that's had over 1 million listens, which 99% of the podcast out there will never get. to take that kind of a show and to take the stance of, hey, I've got enough moxie to be able to just change it because I've got that much faith in my abilities to make a success out of it, I think is a great move, and I commend you for it.
Well, Jerry, bless you for that. And you and I have spoken many times privately about this, because the listening figure thing gets me and gets every podcast, because you and I have discussed this. Depending who you keep your podcast with, your audio with, depending where your listeners download it, depends on your figures. Because every company, and you and I are with different companies, they give out different figures. And you're with Audio Boom, right?
Correct.
I'm with Libsyn. They are two of the biggest, Libsyn the biggest, Audio Boom, one of the most respected players in the podcast market. So when listeners, for you and for me, they discover podcasts and they go, we've got 8 trillion listeners. It doesn't actually mean a lot, because it depends who the podcast is with. It's like, I always think, Jerry, and you and I have discussed this privately, it's like getting in your car and every speedo, do you call it a speedometer in America?
Yes.
It's like every speedometer is different. Now, you'll get in your car, or you'll get in Tracy's car, or you'll get in the works truck, and they're all calibrated to be the same. But when it comes to podcasts, the companies aren't calibrated to be the same. So it's like getting in one car and you're doing 50 down the highway. You get in another car and the police pull you over and they go, Mr. Paulie, you were speeding. And you go, no, it said 50, but actually we're doing 70. And that's the thing that's always got me with numbers. And the other thing is, for listeners, they've got to remember that some shows come out daily. So if you are, like the news shows, for instance, so it's very easy to get these huge numbers and talk about these huge numbers. You're releasing a show every day, for goodness sake. If you're releasing a show bi-weekly, as you normally do, if you're releasing a show once every 6 months, like myself, don't get me started. The numbers mean nothing, really, as you know, and I know they don't bother you in the slightest. What matters are the reviews. I spent 25 years on the radio, and I used to say to young radio broadcasters that I would train, would you sooner have 1 million listeners to your radio show and get paid $10? Or would you sooner have 10 listeners and get paid $1 million? And of course, people coming into radio go, well, I want 1 million listeners. Well, actually, what matters for us as podcasters, and for the majority of podcasters, including me and you, it's the quality of what we put out. It's the stories. It's the interaction with people. And then it's not how many listeners you get. It's reading those lovely reviews, isn't it? The reviews that appreciate, especially for you with all the research you do. And that's what I love about it. I love that interaction, that community. You and I, with our own shows, I think have built beautiful, wonderful communities.
So, Phil, let's jump off the podcast real quick. We're going to get back to it on the end because I want to make sure people know how to find you. But we're doing the show on Tower of London. Now, almost every list I've ever seen of the most haunted places in the world, Tower of London is number one in almost every one of them. Obviously, they've got a 900-year history. They've had hundreds of executions there. So people here, they have this image of what the Tower of London is and what it means. And I'm trying to think from somebody who lives there, what do you think of when somebody mentions Tower of London? Do you think of it like that, or because it's in your country, do you not think of it the way people outside the country would?
Yeah, Jerry, do you know, what a great point. And I was going to say that, and you've actually answered it. I don't think of it that way at all. I was doing a Facebook Live the other day with another paranormal podcast, and I asked the question actually to their listeners, and I said, "What do you consider to be the most haunted place, the most famous haunted place, rather, in England?" And all these places popped up, and nobody mentioned the Tower of London.
Oh wow!
And I knew I was doing this with you, and I said, well, look, I'm going on Hillbilly, and Jerry's going to be talking about the Tower of London, and for this other English paranormal show, everybody went no, and I think what it is, as we know, for our shows, the audience are mainly in the United States. I know for my audience, it's 96% of my audience is the United States. Yours will be, of course, exactly the same, if not more, in fact, because you are American.
We're typically about 85%.
Really? Well, that's fascinating, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is some Americans don't like you. Let's move on, Jerry. Stay in that. Don't be rude. And you'll get the Facebook stats like me. I see in our group on Facebook, it is about 94% of people in our group are in America. And that's why I think the Tower of London comes to that top list. Because when you think paranormal, the backing, the movement behind paranormal, TV shows like Ghost Adventures, podcasts like yours, books, it's normally coming out of the United States. And when it comes to something famous in England, you think of the Tower of London. And then you add in, well, of course, there were, Henry VIII killed some of his wives killed there. We had a thing, actually, in the 1980s here on British television, where they did on Halloween. I think it was the BBC, actually. They did a live Halloween special. And it was done at the Tower of London, just outside the Tower of London. And it was amazing. I mean, I remember watching it as a boy. I mean, I was a teenager, Jerry. You would have been in your late 30s, of course, but I was a teenager. And we both had hair then. And I remember watching this. And we got to the end of it, and it turned out it was just set up. It was a hoax. It was almost like an April Fool, but on Halloween. But that was done at the Tower of London. And I always thought, why? I bet they're going to sell this to BBC America. Where I live in the UK, Gabriel and I live in an area which has more castles per square mile than anywhere else in the United Kingdom. Castles are literally at the end of every garden. I mean, we have hundreds of. We've got a famous castle here called Chillingham Castle. It looks haunted, Jerry. And they do wonderful marketing for the castle itself. Now, they claim to be the most haunted place in England. But then anybody that's watched Ghost Adventures will know that Zach Bagels came over and I think name Zach Bagels, and they went to a pub. They went to a pub, and that was meant to be the most haunted place. So I think when it comes to the Tower of London, because of its history, because of the Henry VIII thing, because of Elizabeth I, I think people around the world can picture it. We're saying Tower of London now, and people can imagine the way it looks like. Do I think it's the most haunted place? No, because no paranormal team could ever get in there because, of course, if I was to say to you, Jerry, where do you keep your jewels? You'll probably say in your trousers. We will move on from that. That's where the Queen, of course, keeps her crown jewels. So you're not going to find Zach Bagels wandering around with an SB7 spirit box. It's a wonderful story. It's got to be haunted from what's there. The Man in the Iron Mask. What a story that is. What a great film that was. So much has happened there over the years, but could it be the most haunted? I don't think, Jerry, we'd ever find out because nobody would be allowed in there. I think you and I should try this, Jerry. You should come over here. Bring the dictaphone. Bring your wife, by the way, as well. And we'll go in. You get Tracy to switch off the lights. All right? and we'll do something. I think we'd probably be arrested by the terrorism squad in about 3 seconds. But is that what you think then? You're in America, but I know you're a massive fan of everything British, apart from myself, and you made that very clear. When you think of the most haunted place in Great Britain, the United Kingdom, or just England, living in Kentucky, is that what you think, Tower of London?
No, actually, it's not, but I'm partial to a couple of stories. I've always kind of leaned more towards the Borley Rectory, and Boleskine House has always been kind of my top, but when it was, not burnt down.
See, being English and doing a paranormal load of rubbish myself, I don't think of those two either. Isn't that weird?
I was going to ask you, what when you have your chats with like the other British podcasters or paranormal folks, what do you guys feel comes up as the most haunted in your country?
Well, the rectory you mentioned, that comes up. But, I think it's... I think, like anything paranormal, it's down to an interest. For instance, I live in this area, which is full of castles. The castles that have those the priest holes that they used to throw people, dungeons. If any of your listeners ever come to London on holiday, one of the biggest places you have to go on the tourist trail is the London Dungeon. There's a couple of them around England. York, beautiful York, old York, of course, not New York. It has one as well. So for me, there are so many castles where all these atrocities happen. And that's an interest for me, being castles. Some people, of course, in America, you don't have old pubs. But we, like the episode where Zach Bagels came over and went to that old pub on Ghost Adventures. We have these pubs where you can go in and get, a pint or, a lemonade for yourself and your good lady. And these pubs are 400 or 500 years old, and they've been a pub for that long. We have here, where I am sat now in my tent, we have a mile and a half away, the first electric lighthouse in the world. And it's my favorite episode of Ghost Adventures where they went to a lighthouse. So I have a lighthouse thing going. That lighthouse is said to be one of the most haunted places in northern England. Now, right next to it is a bar, a pub, and it's built into the cliffs, right on the sea, Jerry. And they 300 years ago they buried it, and it used to be caves for pirates, and there were tunnels under the beach. And then about 100 years ago they made it into a bar, and now it's a bar and restaurant. Well, imagine the stories that place has got to tell.
Yeah, that would
so.
Be
I always think when it comes to hauntings, it's what your interest is. When it comes to the Tower of London, I think a lot of people think of it being number one because Americans can picture it. You can't picture my lighthouse or my little pub or, a pub in Wiltshire, which is 400 years old. You can picture the Tower of London and get the stories. And, of course, you will tell later in this episode some amazing stories about it. So, for me, no. But you know me, Jerry. I'm a cryptoid fan. And I'm not talking about the ex-wife before. I'm a cryptoid fan, and I have to add in that I know it's Tower of London show, but I've always loved the whole cryptoid thing, the Bigfoot stories, ever since I was about 13, 14 years old, and again you would have been in your late 40s. And we had the monster of Boggy Creek that came onto the BBC, and that terrified me. And Gabriel and I watched Finding Bigfoot. By the way, Jerry, they haven't found him yet. I don't want to give you a spoiler, but not yet.
Oh.
I know, not yet. I was gutted. I was gutted because we're so behind here. The Finding Bigfoot team came to the UK to look for Bigfoot. How he got a passport and got on the plane, I have no idea. But the Finding Bigfoot team came to the UK and they investigated 4 miles from my house. Now, I love that show. And if I had known that, we would have gone there. Gabriel and I would have gone there, hid in the woods, and started knocking the trees. You know what I'm saying, Jerry?
Yeah.
We would have done the calls. We would have ruined it. Small, fat, bold host of second-rate American paranormal podcast ruins American network TV show. They would have had to come. They would have had to have rebooted like me, Jerry, and it would have been tonight on Found Bigfoot, and that's the end of it. It would have been the end. Are we talking about the Tower of London? What? How did we get onto?
Well,
you
have a tendency to just wander off and just do your own thing. So
it's the medication I'm on. Let me tell you, and it's old age as well. It's who are you? Where am I? Well, you wouldn't believe my episodes are only 8 minutes long. Let's go.
Yeah, unlike our show, like I said, I think one time you said our shows, some of them lasted for like 3 days, which is not the case.
No, it's true because when I start up, your show, and I think it's going to be great, and then of course Tracy starts talking, and the Tracy-isms start coming out, and I'm using Google Translate to work out what on earth your wife's saying, and then I think that they're on to they're going back to Bobby Mackey's, so the next thing I know, I've grabbed a sleeping bag. And I've ordered a takeout, and it is 3 days later. I've aged. People are banging on the door thinking I've collapsed on the stairs. And I say, no, I'm listening to the latest episode of Hillbilly Horror Stories. Tracy's on one tonight.
Well, enough about our show. Let's tell
it's always about you, Jerry. Me.
Tell us how everybody can find Scared. I can't imagine that people aren't already listening to it, but if they're not, tell them how they can find you. Tell them about you on social media and all the different ways that they can connect.
All they have to donate is $100, and I will share the private website address. No. Just search on Google Play, search on Stitcher. I have no idea what that is. Everybody seems to talk about it. Or, of course, in your iTunes or your podcast app for Scared. Scared's got a question mark. It is a question. But you don't need to put questions. So just search for Scared, or you can find us at scaredpodcast.com. And we're very, very different to Jerry's show. But I've now decided, Jerry, to bring my wife on, and I'm going to start selling shower curtains. Now, have you thought about that yourself?
Well, I'm completely fine with it because I'm partial to the shower curtain business to begin with. And
that's your new business.
That's hey, there's a niche out there for it, and people just overlooked it. But now that we've sold the first one in 6 months, it's got to be a market out there. It's ready to boom. Once you get that first one out of the way, the rest are just going to go.
It must be great. You'll be in a bar with Tracy having a meal, with your children and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren and of course your great 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 grandchildren. And people will come up and they say, what do you do anything apart from work? And Tracy wants to go, well, we've got this enormous podcast, and you just go, well, we sell shower curtains. That's what we do. We just sell the shower curtain.
Well, I mean, you've been in radio. You can't bury the lead.
That's all they care about. How did you find Hillbilly Horror Stories? Was it, from a friend, or was it social media? Well, I bought this shower curtain, and it turned out there was a show behind it. It was amazing. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for Scared, and Twitter Scared, and Instagram Scared. And I don't know, it's quite easy. I told you before, Jerry, right? I have 2 brain cells, and the 2 of them don't like each other. They don't talk to one another. So when I wanted to come up with a paranormal show, I came up with the word Scared because anything else had gone. And I thought, well, that works. I've said to you before, if I had here a shop that sold something like flowers, it wouldn't be Phil's Florist. I just call it the flower shop. If I had, we have sweet shops here, and you and I have spoken about this. You call it candy, of course, in America, where you take our language and change all the words, so we have no idea what you're saying. I would call it the sweet shop or the candy store, and it's the same. When I did my crime show, it's called Worst Crimes Ever, because that's as far as my brain will go. I couldn't come up with something clever. There's a crime show out there called Case File. I don't even know what that means. Mine is Worst Crimes Ever. And it's as far as I go. When I read Hillbilly Horror Stories, I had to put that into Google to work out what the 3 words meant. I'm all right now. But you can find us everywhere, please do. And please do, because we need the listeners. Goodness, we need them.
Well, for everyone that says that the British don't have a sense of humor, here was your proof. Phil, great having you on, brother.
God bless you, man.
More times coming up. We'll have you back on again sometime in the future, and we do some more English stories. And you've always got great stories to tell. That's why I love having you on. I can just kind of let you go, and I know it's going to be great stuff to listen to. So it's been fun. I appreciate it.
Hey, man. Thanks for your kind words at the beginning. The wonderful thing about this is I go back to that community word, actually, that you and I and Tracy have become friends. Tracy and me a bit more than me and you, of course. I mean, who can blame her? Because she seems to have a thing for short, bold, slightly overweight men. But we've all become friends, and you guys support me and my show, and you support my son and our lives, and you're lovely people. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it, man. And you guys are easy to get along with, so it's not that big of a chore on our end, that's for sure. How can you not listen to Phil Holmes and not want to just run right over and listen to his show? He's so damn funny.
He is funny. I love his accent.
And every time we get on the phone, it seems like we're on the phone for like 2 hours talking.
Yeah, he's a pretty fun guy. A real nice guy.
So check out Scared when you get the opportunity. At the beginning of the show, You heard a new friend of ours, a new member of the Dark Myths Collective, Katie Burr, and her show, Southern Grimoire. Did I say that right? I think I did. Grimoire?
I think so.
Her show is really good. It's one that, we don't steer you wrong on shows. Go listen to it. She's fairly new. She's got, I think 8 or 9 episodes. It's not a lot of episodes yet, but you'll like what you hear. Once you start listening to it, you'll be stuck to it. And they're not really long, so like our shows. So I think you'll love it. It's Phil, like to make fun of our length of our shows. But give them a listen. Guys, we can't thank you enough for everything you do for us, all the reviews, all the shirts that you buy. We just posted a picture of Natasha Ali, who runs our Facebook group, and the shirt that she's got. I want to give a special thank you for her. She puts in a lot of work
She sure does.
Help us, and we greatly appreciate that. So you can buy your own shirts, hillbillyhorrorstories.com. Added a couple of new logos to it. So we got 6, 7, 8 logos out there now. So these are a little more plain and simple, but people like those. Also, wanted to mention again, we've got a code coming, but we will be at Modern Love Podcast Festival in August.
So excited for that. Cannot wait.
Yep, it's going to be Generation Y is going to be there, Twisted Philly be there, History Goes Bump, Pleasing Terrors. I can't even begin to mention everybody, but if you just go to Modern Love Podcast Festival, you'll be able to check them out online and be able to see everything. And as soon as we get a discount code, hopefully by next week's show, we'll be able to give it to you and you can save some money on tickets.
Yeah, sounds great. We want to give a shout out to our Wildcats. Go Cats.
Yep, Sweet 16, go Cats.
Yeah, proud of you guys. Keep on going.
And for all you Louisville Cardinal fans, there's always 5 years from now.
Yeah, sorry.
After, all the probation and stuff like that. But
sorry, little birdies.
So, all right, guys, thank you so much. We love you, and we'll see you next week.
Love you guys. Hope you have a great week.